When leaders thunder about unity and victory, why do the shadows murmur about real transformation? President Zelensky stands before the world, promising solidarity and triumph. Yet behind Kyiv's ornate doors, a subtler contest unfolds. Military commanders, once the nation's shield, are gathering quietly, now strategizing not for battlefields, but for the nation's political soul. Their campaign is waged in whispers, not gunfire, and its outcome could remake Ukraine's future, far from the camera's gaze. Consider history. In the twilight of the Roman Republic, military leaders like Julius Caesar shifted from battlefield glory to political ambition. Their moves, first whispered among loyal legions, soon toppled centuries-old systems. Ukraine too faces such crossroads, where the general's silence may herald seismic change. In Germany, politicians offer calm assurances. Stability is within reach, the social contract unbroken. Nightly broadcasts soothe anxious citizens, insisting that Germany's bedrock of security will hold. But beneath these polished speeches, reality slips. Germans are urged to work longer, while pensions and benefits quietly erode, vanishing bit by bit, like daylight fading from a room. The decline of the German social contract echoes Japan's post-bubble era, when promises of lifetime employment were replaced by decades of economic stagnation and youth uncertainty. When prosperity contracts, trust in tomorrow dissolves into anxiety. In both countries, a familiar pattern emerges. The most fateful choices are made in quiet rooms, shielded from the public eye. Official statements maintain the illusion of order, while true decisions are mapped in secrecy. This silence is deliberate, a signal of deeper, unpredictable forces in motion, more consequential than any press conference. Trust only what is spoken from the podium, and you may one day awaken to a country you barely recognize. In that new dawn, your freedoms and future could be decided by hands you never saw, in meetings you never heard of. But how did we reach a moment where silence speaks louder than promises? Let's dig deeper, tracing these silent shifts to their sources. What ties together closed doors in Kyiv and hushed conversations in Berlin? Everything that matters. In Ukraine, the world's attention is fixed on the Eastern Front, but a different power struggle is brewing far from the trenches. Renowned generals, with Valery Zaluzhny leading the charge, are shifting from battlefield tactics to political maneuvering. Kyiv's officials insist it is business as usual, but the denials ring hollow. Behind the scenes, new alliances are taking shape, and London is quietly rising as a nerve center for these covert moves. Recall the 20th century rise of Charles de Gaulle. Once the wartime leader of Free France, he later returned from political exile to reshape his country's very constitution. His transformation from general to president was quiet at first, but ultimately decisive. Ukraine's generals may be following a similar script, their ambitions quietly fermenting away from the limelight. Whispers grow louder. Former military leaders are assembling trusted teams, eyeing parliamentary seats, and plotting strategies on foreign ground. Zaluzhny, now Ukraine's ambassador to the United Kingdom, is rumored to be rallying his old network for a future political campaign. Outwardly, all seems calm, yet insiders detect the tremors. The next front is not in bombed-out cities, but in the corridors of power. Imagine a scenario. In a quiet London townhouse, former generals and advisors meet under the guise of diplomatic discussion. Over tea, they sketch out not just battlefield maneuvers, but legislative agendas and coalition strategies. Each handshake, each nod, is a move on the invisible chessboard of Ukraine's future. Meanwhile, Germany faces its own silent upheaval. The storied social contract, for decades the promise of stability and prosperity, is under threat. Budget gaps widen as the population ages and costs rise. Berlin signals hard choices ahead, raising the retirement age, reducing benefits, and hinting the cherished social state may soon fade into history. To see the real impact, consider the stories of everyday Germans. Maria, a nurse in her late 50s, once looked forward to retirement at 65. Now she faces the prospect of working until 73, while her pension shrinks. Her son Lucas doubts he'll ever see the kind of security his grandparents enjoyed. These are not isolated woes, but a growing chorus of uncertainty. Both nations maintain a facade of normalcy. In Ukraine, leaders talk of unity while quietly laying the groundwork for a new political order. In Germany, daily routines persist, but millions sense the earth shifting underfoot as the security of a lifetime grows uncertain. What binds these stories is not chaos, but the subtle rewriting of fundamental rules over who governs, who protects, and who pays the price. For ordinary citizens, the stakes could hardly be higher. Miss these quiet signals, and you may awaken to a world transformed. Leaders replaced, safety nets recast, and the foundations of daily life changed forever, while your eyes were elsewhere. But what drives these tectonic shifts? Why now, and why so quietly? To answer that, we need to look beyond the headlines to the pressures building inside each society. What happens when generals trade their uniforms for tailored suits, and social contracts begin to feel like IOUs? In Ukraine, the tension is shifting. The war is not just on the front lines anymore, it is creeping into the corridors of power. General Zaluzhny, once celebrated as a hero, now serves as Ukraine's ambassador in London. But beneath his diplomatic exterior, rumors swirl. Whispers say he is quietly gathering a parliamentary team of former military comrades. This makes civilian leaders uneasy. It signals not just ambition, but the possibility of a new battle, one that could redraw Ukraine's entire political landscape. Official statements only deepen the uncertainty. Zaluzhny and his allies choose their words carefully, neither confirming nor denying their intentions. Meanwhile, new polls show parties led by ex-military figures surging ahead. Many voters, exhausted by the old political order, now look to soldiers for clarity and discipline. The promise of military-style resolve is starting to outshine the rituals of the past. Picture the recent polling in Ukraine. If Zaluzhny, Beletsky, and Budanov, three prominent military figures, were to unite, they could command a parliamentary majority. This would be akin to a military caucus in peacetime politics, a phenomenon rarely seen since the days following World War II, when generals sometimes transitioned directly into governance. The message is clear. The public is ready for new faces, even if those faces wear the scars of war. In response, Bankova, the presidential office, scrambles for control. Their latest tactic, citing legal technicalities to block military figures from entering politics. Yet every attempt to shut the door only makes the public more curious about what's behind it. For many Ukrainians, generals have become more than just commanders. They are now symbols of hope and determination in a country desperate for both. Across Europe, Germany faces a different kind of reckoning. There are no tanks in the streets, but the social contract is fraying. The government is proposing to raise the retirement age to 73/benefits and force workers to save privately for their pensions. At the same time, billions in state funds keep flowing abroad, including to Ukraine, fueling resentment at home. This collision between fiscal austerity and foreign commitments is igniting discontent. Recent surveys show overwhelming disapproval of the current leadership. The once mighty parties are plummeting in the polls, while outsiders and new challengers gain momentum. For ordinary people in both Ukraine and Germany, faith in the future is wearing thin. To put this in context, recall the years after German reunification, when social promises had to be recalibrated as the costs of integration soared. Then, too, frustration gave rise to new political movements and challengers from the margins, changing the country's very fabric. The stakes are immense. As old rules are bent or broken, trust in political and social contracts, long the bedrock of daily life, is weakening. While officials cling to procedures and loopholes, new actors are moving fast, reshaping the landscape in real time. This is more than a crisis. It is a turning point. What will emerge from this chaos? As uncertainty spreads, both nations must grapple with profound transformations. The next moves, by generals, politicians, and ordinary citizens, will echo far beyond their borders. What happens when those who once watched in silence become the most powerful force in the room, and no leader's speech can calm the storm? Across Ukraine, a discreet alliance of military commanders is growing bolder. They do not need applause or headlines. Instead, their whispered decisions in shadowed rooms threaten to turn the next election from a debate over promises into a referendum on who deserves to rule. Imagine a future where ribbons and medals trump campaign slogans, and generals, not career politicians, shape the nation's course. Meanwhile, in Germany, a quiet crisis is unfolding. The era of cradle-to-grave security is dissolving. Today, many Germans are being told to work longer, worry more, and expect less. The social contract that defined the post-war dream is being rewritten, one cut at a time. As money flows from welfare programs to military budgets, citizens are left to wonder, has the meaning of solidarity changed forever? Both countries are feeling the aftershocks of unkept promises and hidden transformations. Disenchanted voters are drifting away from the old parties. In Ukraine, some look to military men with steely resolve. In Germany, others rally behind voices from the political fringe. These new champions thrive on public frustration and a hunger for change. Their plans are as unpredictable as the world they hope to inherit. On the battlefield, Ukraine's fight is entering uncharted territory. Drones, artificially intelligent missiles, and invisible cyber attacks are redefining what it means to wage war. The technology is evolving faster than any defense can keep up. Civilians, trapped between borders and bandwidths, are left exposed. Defenses meant for yesterday's wars offer little protection from tomorrow's threats. For example, during the spring offensive, Ukrainian cities faced not only missile barrages, but coordinated waves of cyber intrusions. Hospitals and power grids flickered off and on, not from bombs, but from distant keyboards. In such a world, the line between civilian and combatant blurs dangerously. Back in Germany, the costs of distant wars are coming home. Every euro redirected to defense is one not spent on schools, clinics, or retirement. For young Germans, this means growing up with permanent uncertainty, watching the old dream of a safe and predictable future slip further away. The stakes are rising. Societies that read the signals and adapt may survive the coming storms. Those that miss the warning signs risk losing not just prosperity, but their say in a future shaped far from public view. But these shifts are not confined to distant capitals or policy circles. Their impact reaches deep into everyday lives. How do ordinary people respond when the rules change and old certainties vanish overnight? Let's envision practical steps for both citizens and communities. First, increase your situational awareness. Just as a ship's captain scans the horizon for subtle changes in cloud patterns or wind, you must watch for signs that the ground is shifting. This could be a sudden shakeup in government staff, a new law pushed through quietly, or a respected general's discreet return from abroad. Second, diversify your sources of information. Relying on a single news outlet or official channel is like steering blindfolded. Seek dissenting voices, global perspectives, and, where possible, first-hand accounts. Third, strengthen community ties. When social contracts falter, neighborhoods and local networks become the true safety nets. In Germany, for example, communal housing cooperatives and local associations have helped buffer the blow of welfare cuts, providing support where the state now hesitates. Fourth, build personal resilience. This means not only financial preparation, such as diversifying your savings across multiple banks and assets, but also emotional readiness. History shows that those who adapt quickly, like business owners in post-Soviet states who reinvented themselves overnight, fare best during transitions. Fifth, engage in the political process even when it feels futile. As new actors rise, your voice and vote can influence whether power shifts peacefully or through disruptive upheaval. Recall Poland's Solidarity movement, which began as a whisper in the shipyards, but ultimately transformed the entire Eastern Bloc. In a world where silence can be strategy, how do you read between the lines and act before it is too late? Power almost never changes hands with fanfare. The real direction of a country is revealed in what its leaders and officials do not say. The greatest moves unfold in whispers, behind closed doors, even as public debate fills the air with noise and distraction. Track the movement of resources and alliances, not just words. In Ukraine, military commanders are quietly forging new coalitions and assembling political teams, far from the spotlight. These subtle maneuvers speak more loudly than any speech about unity or reform. In Germany, social benefits are trimmed without fanfare, alliances subtly rearranged, and the true winners of new laws often disappear into the fine print. Always ask yourself, who truly benefits from each change? Where are new partnerships silently emerging? To safeguard your future, build flexibility into your plans. Diversify your savings, avoid relying on a single institution or leader, and listen for new voices rising just out of view. Be wary of official narratives urging patience or sacrifice. Such scripts often conceal deeper shifts already in motion. Observe the feedback loop of power. When authorities stifle dissent or tighten their grip, they may inadvertently fuel support for outsiders and hasten abrupt change. The more desperately the old order clings to control, the more the ground shifts beneath their feet. Above all, trust your own ability to adapt. History does not favor those who merely notice change, but those who respond early and wisely. Overlooking silent transitions can cost you your savings, your influence, and even your place in society as old systems crumble. As the old guard loses its script, what part will you play in the story that comes next? Consider the fall of the Berlin Wall. Few predicted it, yet those who had quietly prepared for economic and political upheaval found themselves leaders in the new Germany. Similarly, in Ukraine, those who anticipate and shape the silent undercurrents will have the greatest say in what follows. The choices you make now will shape how you weather the storm, and who will thrive when the dust settles. Do not wait for the next official announcement to learn your fate. Listen to the silence and begin writing your own future instead. By the time a politician steps up to a lectern, the true decisions have already been made, behind closed doors, in quiet corridors, by hands you will never see. Ukraine and Germany are proof. While the world watches speeches and headlines, silent actors shift the very ground beneath our lives. These are not dramatic coups or sudden revolutions. They are subtle, seismic tremors, almost invisible, until the damage is done. In Ukraine, as leaders speak of unity and victory, a new center of power takes shape in the shadows. Military commanders, once confined to the battlefield, now quietly build teams, forge alliances, and map out a future where they will shape not just the army, but the nation itself. Official denials are drowned out by the steady rhythm of promotions, invitations, and whispered deals. The pattern is unmistakable, if you know where to look. Meanwhile, in Germany, the celebrated social contract is quietly unraveling. Economic headwinds and demographic shifts unsettle the promises of security and stability that defined an entire generation. The public argues over minor reforms, but behind the scenes, architects of policy are already dismantling the old guarantees, one silent decision at a time. The risk is real and immediate. If you react only to headlines, you are always behind. The people who shape tomorrow are those who catch the quiet changes. A fleeting appointment, a sudden departure, a loyalist reassigned, a budget quietly reshuffled, a new face in a crucial meeting. Those who miss these signals may wake one morning to find the rules rewritten, and their own voices erased from the conversation. This is not about conspiracy or shadowy puppet masters. It is about recognizing that history moves not only in riots or revolutions, but in quiet handshakes, closed-door reconciliations, and the long silence after an uncomfortable question. The next era, whether in Kyiv or Berlin, will belong to those who can read between the lines and act before the opportunity vanishes. Ask yourself, are you focused only on the loudest voices, or are you watching the silent movements that truly shape history? In the end, only those who notice the quiet changes will help decide what comes next.